Hi, this is Duck and this is Darkling number 31. Darklings are a particular podcast in the Dark Days radio list. They focus on particular topics in the world of darkness or other games which kind of share similar themes, moods, and concepts that you see turn up in the world of darkness. Or they're just other games that we really, really like. And today we're covering Fading Suns. So, I'm one of your regular Darker Days hosts, Chris, and I'm joined by Pete, who is a infrequent guest in our podcast and to our Darkling. So, Pete, how's it going?
It's going well, absolutely.
Cool. You been up to any good gaming recently?
Gaming-wise, what have I been doing? I've been doing a little bit of board gaming. We fired up Zombicide, which went absolutely gangbusters on Kickstarter to the point where you can actually resell your copy of Zombicide for something like $300-400 on eBay. Apparently the demand for that one's quite high, and that's a hoot. And role-playing game-wise, I've got my fortnightly game of Aberrant, which we're having a lot of fun with.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm obviously. Well, we did the Cthulhu Tech. Google Hangout game, which actually worked quite well in the end.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to that one yet. So how do you reckon it turned out? Was there a total party kill? Did everybody go insane?
It worked all right. I think there was some head scratching with the rules in quite a few
Surprise!
Yeah. It was where it wasn't clear, like when it says a penalty, it wasn't clear whether it be a penalty to the number you were rolling or a penalty to the number of dice you were rolling, which is...
Oh, nice!
Yeah. And of course, played my second session of Iron Kingdoms RPG, so I've been running that, and this time around I've actually invested in a rollout mat, gaming mat, so I've found as many OHP pens at work, and we've got counters currently for where the characters are and the monsters they go up against or antagonists, and that's actually working really well because if you've never played War Machine or Hordes compared to Warhammer, the rules are very simple, very simple, and it's very fast playing, and it translates perfectly well to a tabletop roleplay game, and the rule system translated perfectly well to doing extra skills that are non-combat based. So that's working out perfectly fine. I mean, to give people insight in what I'm running right now is riffing off Brotherhood of the Wolf. So that's because it's a very easy, like if the players recognise the film that I'm referencing for their first story, then they can play to the themes. Even though it may not exactly play out in the same way, at least they kind of get the feel and the mood and the kind of look of it. Dingy, horrible French towns and, misty, fields and, dense woods and wolves and so forth. And, that's going really well. Yeah. So, what else can we say quickly on Darker Days? I mean, I've actually looked at the list. This is the 83rd Darker Days podcast.
So 100 is not too far away. Wow.
100,
we should do something big for 100.
Yeah. And what else we got going on? I just quickly went over the Exalted Kickstarter.
Yeah, I was going to say if we're quickly going to run over things, it is a hell of a good time to be a White Wolf fan, because there is there's so much great stuff going on. What is it? My Hunters Hunted 2 backer PDF that arrived. I've given that a cursory glance. I'm hoping to be able to get a review up on the G Plus sometime in the next couple of weeks. But that's fantastic. And you were just about to say Exalted has third edition has just blown up.
Yeah. It's got 20 days left, and it's at $415,000.
Hot damn!
Now, and its original target was 60,000. So it's clocking up over. You're now almost at 7 times the 700% goal target. So that's crazy, and the amount of the stuff that keeps ticking up on it. I mean, it's getting to the point where I personally was going to wait until I got a reviewer PDF and use that to get a premium print copy, because I just don't have the money to get their crazy deluxe edition. But,
I know what that feels like, yeah.
But the new backer contributions to the books are, they will get some sort of...
Let's have a look.
5 different printed physical bookmarks, so you can bookmark different pages while you're running the game. They've added 50% more words to the sorcery section of the book.
Oh man!
Then they will be getting if they get the next goal up as well, 450,000. They will ensure that John and Holden, who are the main developers of the game, will be able to get them to go to Gen Con. So, there's ridiculous reward tiers and pledge tiers, limited ones. So if you pledge it, you can get to go have dinner with the guys from Onyx Path Publishing at Gen Con and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's all kind of crazy. I mean, I'm liking the look at it. I read about the combat system, how they're totally overhauling it. Not much on the actual systems, but on the general philosophy they're going for. And that all looks, and the way they've modified the map, and they've made it a bigger world and more variation. So that's going well. Obviously, I've started reading through Werewolf 20th Anniversary Edition for Werewolf the Apocalypse, which is, it's exactly what I expected, which is it looks like the book that, Revised was. And, I think there's a lot of different opinions. I've already spoken about this on Google Plus, like how I kind of fall with not being a massive fan of the art for Werewolf. So obviously I'm looking at it as a person that's never played Werewolf the Apocalypse and never even bought the original stuff. So I'm completely kind of unbiased in the sense of I don't have any nostalgia for it.
Doesn't have the nostalgia factor for you, no.
Like, if you've got the nostalgia factor, then it's a great book, I'm sure, and you can't fault it because it's all the old artwork in there and some new stuff and the same artists, and that's great and that's what it deserves. But it's maybe just not my cup of tea in that sense. But I'll read it and see how much the writing may have matured in places because it's had 20 years and it's got writers that got on board with Werewolf the Forsaken and have now been writing on this, so we'll see how that goes.
Absolutely. I'm waiting to pick that one up once again. I need some more cash in the old coffers, and then I think it'll probably end up me doing a pretty massive order and picking up a premium edition of Werewolf, a premium edition of God Machine Chronicle, and probably by that point a premium edition of Blood and Smoke, because that's not too far on the horizon, is it? I think that's looking to be July or something like that. I know it got pushed back. I don't think it was supposed to come out in June. Yeah. So it might be a little bit later on, but yeah, my wallet is certainly happier if it's a little bit later.
I think God Machine Chronicle, I'm happy just with it on PDF right now because it just cements the main book. I'll get it on a hard copy when I actually have time and space because because I've got to think when you move country like I have, and then you think, in another year or two I could move country. I'm going to more than likely move country again for another job. It's like, you don't want to have too many blocks of wood to cart around, and
absolutely.
I have to judge every book on if I like it, but am I going to play it in the next 6 months? And if I'm not, then I have to go, maybe not. So but the nice thing is, print on demand, like premium copies, are always going to be there. So, that's the benefit of drive-through RPG and one bookshelf, and that's everything we just spoke about. So with Matt McElroy on Darker Days 47, which is actually just up. So obviously they should have listened to it already.
Stream, actually. They should have, yes.
So we'll not go on about that. So yes, Fading Suns, finally.
Fading Suns. Back to it.
We've been wanting to talk about this for a while. I think part of the reason for it is Fading Suns obviously shares a design philosophy and a design, when I say philosophy, I mean both in terms of rules and maybe in terms of mood, theme, artwork, layout, and writing, which makes it a cousin, I would say, to classic World of Darkness.
Absolutely.
And it's no surprise because of the writers that worked on it. And when it came out, and I think we spoke about this when we had, let me think, who did we have on the show? I'm trying to think. But when you were, I think when there was some talk about, with regard to Aeon Trinity Universe.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Obviously,
Sorry, yeah.
there's a relationship between Fading Suns and that, in the sense that they came about at the same sort of time. So I kind of see them as kind of like kissing cousins in some respects of how they're related in both what type of game they are, which is sci-fi, and the writers that you see appearing in these books.
Yeah.
So, what do we have to say? First of all, where the hell did Fading Suns come from, and what the hell is it about?
Well, okay, to the best of my knowledge, okay, because when we say the same writers, while we're talking about Andrew Greenberg and Bill Bridges. Now, if you know your White Wolf history, these guys were both. These guys were both, I think they popped up. Well, actually, no. Bridges was around, I think, from the beginning. Bridges has got sole writer credit on a whole bunch of the early vampire books, particularly the original Hunter's Hunted. That was entirely Bill Bridges, and I think he was. I know someone's going to pop up on the G Plus and say, "No, Pete, you're wrong." I'm relatively certain he wrote most of second edition Werewolf the Apocalypse, and I think he was line dev on that one for a fair chunk of it. Yeah. So if we've got exact times, I think it came out something like, where are my show notes? I think it came out something like 96.
Yeah.
And originally it was attached to a video game, which was Emperor of the Fading Suns.
Yes.
Which unfortunately I've never played. Well, basically, I think it was a bit of an obscure title to begin with, and these days it's like most old games, it requires a DOS box or something to get cranking. I think it's a little bit similar to, or this is once again, so I've read, it's a little bit similar to things like Master of Orion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of what do they call it, the 4X game, where you're managing troops, managing resources, managing your interactions with other factions, and managing spaceships and whatnot. Alright, so that's Fading Suns. Now, where to begin with Fading Suns?
I think the important thing also to note is that Fading Suns is produced by Holistic Designs.
Yeah, different company.
Yeah, So we're talking about a completely different company to White Wolf. And yeah, so it's essentially, I guess it's Holistic Designs. If I just quickly bring that up, they don't really produce as much anymore. They usually just, they're licensing out the IP. But it's founded in 1992, and obviously Bill Bridges and Andrew Greenberg are writers and game developers for them. And the other thing to note with Fading Suns, we'll also quickly note, is there are some other games attached to it. So you can find a miniatures game, which is for the space combat, which is called Noble Armada. And you can find a live-action role-playing game based upon the Fading Sun setting called Passion Play, which is also a term that turns up in Fading Suns, which we'll talk about later. And so again, you can definitely see that there's a whole host of things which kind of make it feel like a White Wolf game, but it's not a White Wolf game.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, so what is Fading Suns about?
Now, it's partly what I like about Fading Suns, but it's very difficult to boil what is Fading Suns down into a one-sentence descriptor. It's not quite like, Vampire the Masquerade or any of the White Wolf games where you go, well, it's vampires in the modern day. I suppose the easiest way to start with this one would be it's science fiction fantasy. So in the sense that, yes, it is definitely science fiction. It's set, 3,000 years in the future, but it's got a lot of the trappings of fantasy novels. You think I'm more or less on the right track here, Chris? Or?
I would say it is. I think it fits the classic term of space opera, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can, because obviously space opera allows you to incorporate some over-the-top fantastical elements compared to, say, harder science fiction settings. So this is like, so it's like kind of like comparing, say, Star Wars to Star Trek: The Next Generation. I say Star Trek: The Next Generation because Star Trek: Next Generation got, bogged down in its own jargon and became more hard SF. But that's a good starting point anyway.
Yeah. So you've got initially in your setup, you've got the traditional sort of space republic, which was, I suppose, that was a little. You could argue that was a little bit, that was very utopian, and then that it was utopian. It was democratic, and then that fell badly. And so you've now got, which is something which is very much like a second Dark Age. So you've got things like, the controlling system is very, it's theocratic, and it's also feudal. So if we start from the beginning, or we sort of boil it down to what is your average person like in the Fading Suns universe, well, he's literally a serf. His life is very similar to what a serf would be during the Middle Ages in Europe. And he sits, and he would be sitting there, tilling the fields in a very traditional way. But the overseer who looks after him, he may well have a laser rifle, and every so often he would see potentially a starship go past, and or some kind of flying car. So the technology is there, but it's not evenly distributed. It's not a utopia. It's in the hands of, really, what have we got? Sort of three different main factions. You have the noble houses, you have the merchant guilds, and then you have the church. Yeah, it's a setting which obviously draws from a lot of literature inspiration. I mean, there's recognisably elements of Dune, Dan Simmons' Hyperion Cantos. And if you wanted to draw parallels to other settings, that obviously draw from the same kind of inspiration material. Warhammer 40,000 is essentially, is the grimmer, darker version, and more insane version of Fading Suns, because obviously again, you've got this spread out humanity, you've got this church which is representative of how humanity's gone a bit backwards, even though they've had all this amazing technology. Artificial intelligence, true artificial intelligence, is banned, and it's this fiefdoms and nobles, and that, as you say, the average person is either living a Middle Ages kind of lifestyle, or if they're lucky, maybe Victorian or somewhere in between. Absolutely. So one of the big things in the background kind of builds on, and I suppose that cliche is probably not the right term, but it's, what is the right term? It's this idea that when humanity went to the stars, we discovered, of course, that someone had already been there. So when humanity sort of made it out, just to the edges of our solar system, we discovered a jump gate. We discovered this massive artifact, which, how would you describe it? It's probably, grab your Fading Suns first edition, have a look at the cover, there's your jump gate. And it's I suppose it operates in a very similar manner to, say, the jump gates from Stargate SG-1, only this one's big enough to fly the Death Star through.
It's the super gates which the, oh crap, I can't think of the Stargate, the Ori use. And the jump gates in Fading Suns, it's always hard to describe how big they're meant to be, because I guess there's kind of conflicting ideas on scale, but I think the idea is they're about the size of the moon, I think it's fair to say. And
the moon works. As I said, I always just said, it's big enough to fit pretty much whatever you could conceivably want to get in there. Your Star Destroyer, a ship as big as your Star Destroyer can use it. And if it's bigger than a jump gate, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's, I guess the way to describe its design is I guess the best term is cyclopean, because obviously it has these massive ornate either gargoyles or humanoid faces that adorn the entire circumference of these giant gates. And the gates, the important thing to note, the gates have are a ring, but then they have at each at 90 degrees there is a kind of a point, like a portion of it, which creates a kind of a ring with a cross. And when it activates, I think I've seen in videos from the video game that those sections kind of pull out and then the gate fires up, and it creates its wormhole or whatever you want to call it. And they're massive. And so humanity discovered a giant gate out in the Oort belt of the solar system. So these gates are pretty far out. You're using sublight speed drives to get from the inner system to the outer system to the Oort belt of the star system. So that's where all the small things are, almost the very edges of the actual solar system. Yeah. And one of these things is hanging there, hopefully at one of the what's the points? Is it a Kepler point? But it's able to sit there pretty much in a set position. And they're massive, and I think the setting describes how it took a while for humanity to work out how to get it to work, and eventually found that it was a series of by accident, a series of a way of like firing laser light at the right component of it, which activates it. So you've basically got a way of triggering it by laser light, and that's kind of the transmission code. And that opened to one world, but then obviously these gates can open to many more. And you need to know how to do that. So you could work it out, or you can discover things that can help guide you. So in other words, more coordinates stored in the ruins of this race that created these massive jump gates. Yeah. So humanity begins to spread throughout the galaxy.
Yeah. Not so much the galaxy, but more sort of through the jump gate network. We discovered that, there's in addition to the jump gates, there are sort of ruins, obelisks, and statues and things scattered through. We discovered there's some on Mars, and it turns out, or it's believed that yes, in eons past there were progenitor races. There was at least two of them, which I think overall they get called the Anunnaki, which I'm probably mispronouncing the hell out of. Yeah. And they've obviously, and their civilization has fallen. They've had some kind of war, and we're essentially, running around with their leftover toys. When we go through the jump gates, we discover a couple of other races, some of which who seem to have been uplifted by somebody. So obviously these Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we get a few races like that, and I'm just trying to think what else. The other important thing to say as humanity spreads through. I mean, so the discovery of these ancient ruins as well, they have quite important implications to humanity's relation to the greater universe and to things that fall outside of known science. And also, traveling through a gate isn't quite that simple. The first travelers through the gate experienced something known as the Saratha effect.
Yeah.
And so to explain, so these jump gates, when they're seen, it's kind of like the jump gate is meant to project a image of the main world of the system that you're traveling to. So you can see that, as an image, before the wormhole of the gate that you go through. Now, whether it's a wormhole or not is another thing entirely to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's a whole thing related to that, because it's basically all about information, matter, transmatting, and all that kind of craziness that goes on. And the Saratha effect has kind of an out-of-body experience for humans and other races that pass through the gates. And because of this, and because of its implication on being damaging to humanity, and the fact that people get obsessed just going through the gates as it is, that they have to put on these, what they call they have to install jump engines on the ship, which is kind of a way of actually, they lie about actually how the way of the ship is actually able to jump, because the ship has to have two main components to jump through a jump gate, which is one, something which activates the jump gate, which tells it where you want to jump to, and the other part is what they call the jump drive engine, which is actually, it isn't required, it's actually something that just projects a field that stops the Saratha effect.
Yeah, that's true. Because the powers that be at the time, because at this particular point in the timeline, the people who of course discover the jump gate are, what are they called, the Zaibatsus, the inheritors of mega corporations who of course have the resources to get out there in the first place, and the Zarathans then become something of a cult. The reason why it's called Zaratha is because that's after you experience this effect, that's a word that everyone says. You just kind of whisper it and don't quite know where that came from. So they install these shields to mask the Zaratha effect, and that sort of dies off. It still exists, but it's very much in the shadows. So let me think. So condensing down a couple of thousands of years of backstory. So as humanity then spreads out to the stars, and they establish. We'll skip over a little bit here because there's a lot to get through. They establish a republic. And then that falls, and then I think that they establish the Second Republic, which is the greatest republic. It's humanity knows no want. Technology is the tech level for everyone is fantastic. Diseases are cured, all that sort of thing. And then, of course, that falls. That falls itself. They have a massive tech revolt, I would suppose, similar in a little bit to the way the Butlerian Jihad is described in Dune. And around that time, they then, of course, discover the phenomenon where the series gets its name, the fading suns.
Yeah.
The suns themselves, all the stars that humanity occupies, are beginning to fade. And the church that's popped up, the Church of the Celestial Sun, which we'll come back to later, they come to the interpretation that this is God, or is he called the Hyperion now? This is God's punishment for humanity and the other races for their hubris, for them trying to raise themselves up to be like gods. So it then comes to turn that no, your average human has to be stupid. Your average human can't handle knowledge. Your average human has to live a simple life. And the only people who can't live their lives are the chosen people. They are church members. They are people of high breeding, so the nobility, and they are people in the merchant guilds. Because the church came up with, of course, the great problem, which is we are claiming technology is wrong, but we still, need it. We still need to be able to get from planet to planet. We still need to be able to move around and spread the good Lord's word.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things with that. So the fun facts are with the whole term of the fading suns is that all the stars you can see in the sky are dimming, and they're dimming due to something. So obviously, we even now, in just normal technology, can determine the age of a sun and how long it should live, because we look at we can determine from its light how big that star is and where it sits on the kind of the scale of solar masses. So we can estimate how long the star should live. And the fading suns phenomenon doesn't follow physics. So the stars are becoming darker at a rate that doesn't match what we know about stars. And so it kind of builds into the whole idea of a dark age of technology, is there is a literal dark age occurring.
Yes, it's a little bit thematically similar to things like Gehenna and things like the Apocalypse in the White Wolf games. This belief that, well, the stars are fading. These are truly the last days. So and the church plays that up to their advantage, so it's the apocalypse is on its way, so you'd better make sure you have everything in order, that sort of thing.
So this church, so how would you describe them?
Well, I mean, it's once again the phrase church is a little bit it's an overall, the Church of the Celestial Sun. It's an overall claim. There's a bunch of smaller factions within it.
Mm-hmm. We'll get back to the individual factions. I was just kind of getting at the origin of them and kind of the flavour, because I would describe the Church of the Celestial Sun is kind of like a neo-futuristic Catholicism of
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Which has basically grown out of the need to incorporate the best of all earthly religions that predated it, and centers around a prophet, I guess is the easiest way to describe him, known as Zebulon. So what more can we say about Zebulon? I'm off the top of my head, and I haven't got the book open here because I'm looking at some of the notes. How does Zebulon become so important?
Well, he's I suppose for his time, because remember this is 3,000 years in the future. Mm-hmm. He is as important as Muhammad. He is as important as Jesus. So he popped up, and he claims to have been given a vision of the star, a vision of heaven, a vision of the Hyperion by the Pancreator. That's the term. That's the game's term for God. And yeah, he gathered his apostles and he spread the good word. In the game itself, it's a little bit it's dubious as to what he was beforehand. So some say he was a Catholic. Some say he was a Catholic out preaching the word of God. Others say he was a Muslim out preaching the word of Muhammad. That's all kind of been lost to the mists of time. And so that's but yeah, it's very much kind of space Catholicism. They specifically use a lot of Latin.
Mm-hmm.
That's this now dead language is actually I think a lot of them speak in Latin actually, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They even code in it.
That's true. It's a wonderful idea, that one.
Yeah, so Zebulon is this new prophet who has a vision of the holy flame, and the point about the holy flame is he's basically preaching. I would say it's kind of like he's preaching a concept of which is, if you were fully enlightened to the meaning of his teachings, it would be very Gnostic.
Yeah.
But for the laity, it's not Gnostic at all, because when I say Gnostic is because he's preaching the idea of the holy flame, which is this divine spirit that is the Pancreator and rest in the Hyperion. And he's saying that, within us all and within all stars, there is a spark of the holy flame. And that it's up to us to kind of tap into that divinity that lies within all of us. Mm. And of course, the whole point is that the church is meant to be guiding people to understand how to unlock that divinity within them. But if you do that, you kind of you don't then really have control on people. So this is the kind of the paradox of what the church is in some respects.
Mm.
And it becomes a universal theology, because obviously it's not just humans that follow this, but slowly other races follow it, because one of his disciples that he has, is in fact one of the alien races in the setting. So yeah, the church is interesting, and as I say, there's different factions within the church. And in this sense, there's very much a 3x5 model. So there's 3 factions that have 5 sub-factions. So in some respects, it's very prophetic of how New World of Darkness turns up.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's a variety of how these priests act. And yeah, so we're up to the dark age of technology, aren't we? So there's kind of there's that kind of fall, and then there's the fall of the megacorporations and Zaibatsu, who are behind the republics. And from those we get the 2 other factions, which are the Nobility and the Merchant League. So the best way to describe the Nobility is, essentially, they are they are sub-factions within the megacorps, within the Zaibatsu, who use their position to rewrite their own history, to portray themselves as old nobility, and to lay claim onto the portions of these falling corporations. So, for example, some people claim they're descended from the House of Windsor. Some others may claim they're descended from Tsarist Russia, and so from the Tsars themselves. Some would even claim they're descended from the Chinese dynasty emperors, and so you get these. There's 5 main noble houses, and basically the main point of the noble houses is they've carved up the known worlds into worlds they have full control over, and areas of worlds that they don't have control over, but they own some of the land of. And obviously they have, trade agreements, and some houses are more antagonistic to others, and there are minor houses as well, that have less influence, and of course they did have influence, but falling out of power. And the Merchant League, in that respect, then are the remnants of the democratic part of the megacorps, because they still hold on to the old ideals while also trying to maintain the lost technology.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. What else can we say? So that kind of gives you the overall setup. That kind of gives you the long to mid-term back history of the game. Now, the short-term history of the game sort of 50 to 20 years before sort of the default beginning year of the game. We had the Emperor Wars, which I think, how to best describe them? Probably quite similar, maybe a little bit to the Civil War that you had portrayed in Game of Thrones, where sort of each noble house went to war to try and determine who was going to who was going to be able to declare themselves emperor. And so currently in the current storyline, the current emperor is, what's his name? I'm going to muck it up. Doesn't matter. The Hawkwood family have taken. Yeah, it's Emperor Alexis is the current ruler of the known worlds, and so in the aftermath of this war, he has set up the Questing Knights, which is a group which is going to go out and try and rediscover some of what has been lost. Perhaps try and rediscover technology, perhaps try and rediscover worlds, because it's possible to essentially turn your jump gate off. If you can fire a particular program at it, which will either shut it down completely or will put it on a timer for several centuries. And a couple of worlds during the Emperor War or during the Dark Age of technology chose to do this.
Or the other thing that would have happened is that people would have lost the jump gate keys. So these are small, kind of like I would say palm-sized cylinders, which you plug into your jump computer in your ship, and they have a jump key can have either one or many jump codes, which will allow you to jump along from one jump gate to another, or an entire route even. So you have to, each time you go from one gate into another, and then you have to go back into that gate and then out into the next one. And so there's a wonderful map of the known worlds, so of all the jump gates, because of course, as you said, Pete, there's some of these worlds are lost, and the known worlds as they are is a mere fraction of what the old Second Republic was. Cool. Of course, there was a war for an emperor before Alexis Hawkwood came into power. That was when Vladimir was brought to power. He was an interesting fellow because he came to power with his own house, and on his
House Alecto, if I recall, that was it.
Yeah, and on his coronation, he died, And apparently that is due to the influence of demons, which we'll get to. Is there anything else we need to say about the main setup of the game? So I think
I think we've pretty. It's as I said. Look, that's as much as a rough overview as I think we can give you. But that pretty much brings us to the current game time of, what is it? I think it's the year 5013. The thing which the writers put in was and I don't know if this is still the case. I haven't seen the most recent edition of the game. Was the game year always corresponded to what the current year was, just 3,000 years in the future.
Yeah.
So at the time of printing, it was, of course, the year 3009. It was the year 3996, and now we're up to 4013. Was it 5013? I need to look it up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing we can now say is that the overall view of how you can. There's many ways you can actually really play this game. You can play a very local game that is restricted to one world or one system, or you can play something that gallivants around a portion of the known worlds, or you can go off exploring and try and find lost worlds and fighting the barbarians at the outside of the known worlds. And you have, because you've got these three factions, Nobility, which are all jockeying for position with the Emperor, and you've got the Merchant League, who are all jockeying for position to be the one making the most money, and also to maintain their technology in the face of the Church.
Yeah.
And you've got the Church, which is also jockeying for position because they want to be. There's always going to be the one faction that wants to have the most influence over the direction of humanity, and you can end up with You've got basically the setup for very Byzantine kind of politics and conspiracies, and small skirmishes between factions, and as they're trying to grab ancient artifacts or gateways to lost worlds, or just pieces of technology. And that's really cool. I mean, it's got quite a epic amount of setting that's quite, I would say, accessible, because
it's incredibly well fleshed out. Now, I mean, this wasn't a small game line. This wasn't a 1 or 2 book deal. There's something like 25 books. I think it's about. I've got most of them. I think it's about it's a good foot of my bookshelf. So it's the only thing I can really compare it to, I think, in terms of the detail that they've gone into in fleshing out every single corner of this background. I think in terms of what's available role playing game wise, which isn't a licensed work, it's not something like the Star Wars role playing game or something. It's I think it's in terms of its peers, we're talking Traveller, and maybe we're talking BattleTech. But that's really it for this sort of. But those are really the only other games where, if you're playing that sort of a space opera, where you've got your sort of role playing's own original IP.
Yeah, I would say the only setting that obviously competes for it for telling almost a similar kind of setting, but where everything's been turned to 11, which obviously changes the tone and the mood and the type of stories you can play, is Warhammer 40,000. So if you were playing, say, Rogue Trader, which I have read the books that, there are lots of similar elements between the two games, but because of the very nature of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, because it's so massive in its scope, like its scope is so much more massive than Fading Suns, it changes the accessibility in the sense that it's detailed, but I would say the density of the detail is different, because obviously Fading Suns is dealing with, say, you've got a lot of information that covers, say, these 15 main factions that are spread out over the best part of 20 worlds.
Yes,
and Warhammer 40,000 has, like, a notoriously massive forces spread out over the entire damned galaxy. And,
we've discussed that a couple of times where it was, and it's depending on how you play it, the scale of Warhammer 40 can always be, I imagine it can be daunting for new GMs and it can be a little bit of a problem. But I mean, particularly in Rogue Trader, where it's the case of, the main PCs are running they have their own ship and it's got a crew of, 2/3 of a million.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, well, let's go down to the planet. Or we should send, let's send an underling to go down to the planet. I would almost argue that for something like Rogue Trader, it'd be worth playing troop play, where each player has multiple characters, because you just couldn't imagine the Rogue Trader himself going down to the planet because no, I'm going to stay here because I'm the leader of this ship.
It's almost written that way. In fact, it's almost just that the GM plays the Rogue Trader and everyone else gets given the orders. Because it makes it a little bit. Because again, your issue there is player agency. Because obviously you don't want to get players to be intimidated by having to make a choice. Anyway, so that kind of contrasts the play style. So I guess we should maybe look at the factions in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
Or, we'll quickly say this because obviously you've mentioned this. So, also, again, to get the scale of the setting, the spaceships are, I always like to imagine that the largest spaceship you've got in the setting is about the size of, almost the size of, like, say, a Star Destroyer. Like, at the biggest.
That's about as huge as they get, yeah.
I think technically in their canon, the ships don't quite get that big, but I kind of like that kind of, imperial kind of scale, and, to give you a sense of like what those are like. And there's always something fun, like, the fact that you've got, say, the player character's troop, they've got some small transport vessel.
Yeah.
Which piggybacks on large trading vessels, and so they jump into a system, and then once they're there, they get pulled in. They basically ride all the way into the main system because their ship does not have the fuel capacity to get them that far, and then it drops out and does the rest of the journey.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to the Hayliner idea from the Dune universe.
Cool.
But also, I mean, if this might be us getting sidetracked, but in sort of keeping with the rest of the background, there was kind of no need to ever build massive ships of scale. There was no need to ever build, massive generation ships, because when you fired up the jump gate, the jump gates never, to the best of my knowledge, never led to a dead system. There was always an Earth-like world in there. So so they never had to pack, and they never had to pack for a massive, sort of generational journey. So the ships never had to be, huge, and then they never had to pack in all these vital systems, because ultimately, they always knew for 100% that they were going to get somewhere. Yeah.
And also you can, because of the sheer scale of the gates, you would have one gate. You would have convoys. So actually, you would have one ship tasked with opening the gate, and the rest would follow it through. Yeah. So you didn't have to have just like one ship carrying everything. You could have like 40 go through. One opens the gate and leads everything through, and then once they get to whichever world, they spread out as they see fit. Cool. So, I guess we should start at, who should we start with? Shall we start with the Nobility? Because they're kind of interesting, I guess. They're kind of fun. So, we've got 5 main noble houses, the known worlds, and they're known as House Hawkwood, House Decados, House Hazat, House Hazat, but they're known as the Hazat, House Lihalan, and House Al-Malik. So immediately from those names, you kind of get a sense of, one of them is very much a kind of House Atreides style, kind of neo-European, neo-French, English, European house. That takes the best of like House Habsburg and House of Windsor, and, the houses of Bourbon and so forth. House Decados, sound as decadent as their name,
yeah.
but
they're almost your sort of default. Hawkwood are your default quotation fingers good house, and Ducados are your default sort of evil house. They're sort of the House Harkonnen of the setting.
I've never really, to be honest, I didn't quite like exactly how they were portrayed sometimes, but so I kind of looked at them as trying to get them as close to being as kind of Tsarist Russia. And the most decadent parts of, say, I guess the most decadent parts you could say of, like, Venetian merchant nobility. Okay, and then we have the Hazat, and they're basically your Spanish conquistadors. So they're basically Spanish and Portuguese nobility. They're totally into fencing and sword fighting. And they have an interesting relationship with a lost house known as House Chalkai. The Hazat also have a interesting issue because their main homeworld is very near to these barbarian we use the term barbarian in quotation marks, barbarian humans who exist outside of the known worlds, who are known as the Kurgan Caliphate, who are kind of like your I guess if you were to sum them up, they're kind of like your non-Muslim, your pre-Islamic Persia. So they're more kind of I'm trying to think of the term. Yeah, classic old school Persia before like the coming of Muhammad. So that's kind of who they're up against. You've got the Li Halan, who are apparently they've become this very pious nobility due to some dodgy history of their house with dealing with trafficking with demons and devil worship in that sense, and also ancestor worship. Though the ancestor worship obviously makes sense because when you listen to their name, Li Halan, you get the classic ideas of Chinese warring states, dynastic houses, and of course then you can incorporate into them, if you want, kind of the elements of like shogunate Japan. And then finally we've got House Al-Malik, who sound exactly as you would think. They're basically your merchant house. They're totally in bed with the Merchant League. They love technology, and they're again kind of your more Islamic Persian flavored house in comparison to the Caliphate. And yeah, those are the 5 main houses. And there are numerous small houses who don't hold as much power. And then also there are lost houses and houses that are apparently extinct. So, Pete, what did you want to comment on those?
I think you pretty much had everything covered there. We've got a lot to get through, so how about I talk a little bit about the Merchant League?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so your Merchant League, they of course, they cover keeping the machinery running. So your 5 factions within them, you start off with the Charioteers, who are probably the most respected of all the guilds because, well, they keep the ships running. We spoke a little bit before about the jump keys. They maintain that technology. Nobody else has access to jump keys but them. So if you want to get anywhere, you need to go and see, you need to have the merchants on your side. And I think they can actually cut you off from space travel. So they're a little bit similar to, well, in that regard, they're similar to, who were they? They're similar to the jump slugs, whatever the hell they were called.
Navigators. Yeah, they're so basically your pilot, if you're like a noble house, your pilot would be on your side in matters of conflict between houses, but is ultimately on the side of the Charioteers. So he's sanctioned by the Charioteers to carry jump keys on your behalf. They make all the spaceships. Well, they keep all the design and keep them going. Yeah, that's quite simple. I guess they're also the group that train primarily behind the training of pilots for the houses, because obviously the houses want fighter pilots and so forth. Cool.
We've also got the Supreme Order of Engineers. Now, and once again, these ones, like the Charioteers, these ones are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They keep the machinery running. They have access to, they have access to what's left of Second Republic technology. And while they can't sort of build a lot of it, they can maintain a lot of the stuff that is left. So everyone wants to keep them on side. We've also got, on top of them, who have we got? We've got the Muster, who are sort of the labour union. What else? Sorry, what do the Muster do?
They're interesting. They're
sorry,
kind of like, no, it's cool. So as you said, they look after like human resources. I think that also, if I remember reading, it's not their nickname is Chainers, so obviously that's relation to the fact they also they operate a form of, I guess you could say, a form of slavery, even though slavery is illegal.
Volunteered labour.
Volunteered labour, and they're also behind like food manufacture, because obviously if they're going to maintain such large workforces, they also understand how to feed their people.
So that's who we've spoken about. That was the Muster. We've also got the Reeves, who are, I suppose the Reeves are your lawyers and your bankers. You still need, even in the far future, you still need laws to be drafted up. Mm-hmm. You still need jurisprudence, scholarship, those sorts of things, people to run your economics.
Yeah, I guess it's also important. They're kind of like, they're very much a callback to the original banks, set up like, as I say, like in Venice where the first bank was, because of course, communication in Fading Suns, there is no faster than light travel, and there is no faster than light communication, so it's not like you can just send a message easily from one world to another world through the jump gate. You can't send signals through the jump gate like that, so you have to have ships carrying messages. So there's going to be ships of the Reeves, carrying gold bullion, carrying bankers' notes, and if you're traveling between worlds and you don't want to carry all your money with you, obviously you would dump it in one bank and get a banker's draft, and so when you land at the other world you go, well, here's my banker's draft, I want this amount of money. So it's a callback to the classic pre-communications technology banking.
Yeah. And I think finally there you've got the Scravers Guild, who they're the Scavengers Guild, and it's their job to try and get Second Republic technology working again, trying to see what they can salvage. They're also sort of on top of that, they're actually something of a crime syndicate, I suppose. they would be I suppose the dodgiest of all the guilds.
Yeah, and I mean, as it says, they're involved with like racketeering, information brokers, hitmen, thugs, casino shots. I think you could also, I think maybe some of the other, because there's a few other minor houses that mostly fall under their umbrella, so I guess they also have their fingers in the entertainment industry.
Mm.
So on some of the worlds that have like cinemas and so forth, because there are worlds that are still that developed, it would make sense they're involved in that, because entertainment is one step away from just, full-on drugs use and so forth, and that seems to be their kind of thing. Cool, and yeah, as I said, so I'm just going to look quickly at the minor guilds. Like, there's minor guilds that are there's the brewers, the bureaucrats, the carnivaliers, the courtesans, the
brewers are very important, yes.
Yeah, the town criers, the word rights. So, again, there's a lot of scope in many of these books with the minor houses, or in this case, the minor guilds, that you could really have a character that in a party that is quite unique and has a very distinctive feel to them.
Yeah.
So the church.
Ah, the church.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, this is fun, isn't it? Do you want to start with Earth Orthodox and tell us about that?
Wow.
Oh
man, the Earth Orcs. Well, I mean, the Earth Orcs. Sorry, I'm losing my voices here. The Earth Orthodox are kind of, if you want to play, I suppose, a default priest, or if you want to play a character who isn't kind of factionalized, the Earth Orthodox is where you would go. The vast majority of the priests would be Earth Orthodox, and by Earth, it's interesting spelling of the way we spell it. It's with a U, so it's sort of Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say beyond them. They are the classic priest. The type of things they'll do is like, christenings or whatever you want to call it, naming ceremonies and, funerals and confession and, things like that. I guess, you can also play them. This mostly turns up in their minor sets. You can play them to like being the historian or even they could even be like the doctor of the party quite easily. But then, as I say, there's there's other factions of the church who aren't Orthodox who are very kind of cool. So Brother Battle, these guys.
Everybody loves the Brother Battle. If you want to play a paladin, if you want to play the closest thing this setting has to a space marine, that's the way you go.
Yeah, because you can get in the game space marine armor essentially for them. Fully enclosed, blessed battle armor, and
they call them the best.
Yeah, there's not much more you can really say about them other than they've been particularly important in skirmishes against particular aliens, in particular against the symbiotes, aren't they? They're quite important because
absolutely, yeah,
of the fact that the church call upon, I guess you could basically call it, they call upon theurgy. So the setting does have magic, and it does have holy rituals, which is theurgy. It does have psionics, and it does have other things. And so obviously, the church needs people who are good in battle that can throw around some holy retribution.
Absolutely.
Which brings us onto the Eschatonic Order then. So, what can we say about these guys?
The Eschatonic Order.
I guess they kind of sum up the whole Gnostic part that I was saying earlier, I guess, about the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
They, I guess, I mean, the write-up for them on the wiki, and, which comes from books, of course, is, they're the soothsayers and mystics and madmen, maybe, but they're kind of like, but they follow the teachings of Zebulon and the Pancreators. So they bring into the church what would have been at one time considered heretical teachings and dangerous kind of magics. But, as I said, they came into their own because theurgy proved useful against the Symbiotes invasion. So these Symbiotes are a very strange alien race.
We can get to them a little bit later. Like we have a lot to cover. It's a very well fleshed out background.
And then, of course, the group which kind of, I guess, mirrors, or is the dark reflection, or the natural antagonist, really, of the Eschatonics, Temple of Vesti. Pete, how would you describe Temple of Vesti?
The Avesties are your Inquisitors. If you want, they are the choice for a player character which that guy is going to want to play. So they are the ones who despise technology. They will root out those who are looking to. They will root out the learned people. They will root out demon worshippers, and they have flame guns. So they will literally burn away the infection. So there's a lot of scope with these guys. You can have they have their own. What is it? They're based on a fire planet. And they're all about taking the holy flame quite literally to the Pancreators' enemies.
And they wear red, flame-proof holy robes, which sums them up quite nicely. Yeah, they make for brilliant antagonists of the game as well. Because obviously, the thing is, obviously, like, I mean, you've got a group of players, and with our modern contemporary morals and so forth, and obviously people may playing characters that they can relate to more easily. So you don't it's very hard to relate to a bunch of screaming pyromaniac church nutters. So you're often when you see them and they start spouting nonsense, you're like, just piss off, will you? Which is often the answer to them. And then, so finally,
we can talk a little bit about the investigation. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the thing. I mean, unless you have, and it depends on where you are in the known worlds. But unless you're a noble, or unless you're a noble, unless you're a member of one of these factions, unless you have a damn good reason to be able to read, unless you have a damn good reason to have a piece of technology, they will quite literally brand you on the forehead. They have got their own symbol, and it will brand you as, well, not so much a traitor, but as a heretic. Yeah, people will be literally able to see your sin. So of course you'll end up with somebody wanting to play one who will then run off and brand another PC, and then you'll have internal conflicts. So yeah, that's the way it always happens.
And so finally we're on to Sanctuary Aeon, who are
they're the healers, aren't they? They're
basically the healers. They're the holy hands. They are there's not much more really that really sums it up in one good way. I mean, that's something pretty much very good about all the main factions of Fading Suns, is that you can sum up the concept behind all of them in a sentence very quickly. So it's very easy to sell players on, like, well, this is what this faction is. It's an archetype. But obviously there's a lot of room within the archetypes to play about with it. Cool. Well, that's all the main factions, and there are. Let me just quickly go into minor church sets. Let me just see. Oh, there's a few, but it's not as many as the other ones. There's some. Okay, so for example, there's one church set which is a sanctioned part of the church, which is led by the Oban, who are one of these alien races, and who a member of that race was in fact a disciple of Zebulon, the prophet. But yeah, there's a few small factions in there, and there's a list of heresies and so forth. But that's all the main factions, really. It's important to note then that while you have all these noble houses and merchant leagues and the Universal Church, that the questing knights essentially fall outside of those groups, because the questing knights is something set up by the Emperor as a way of establishing his own power base that is separate from his house. So he's obviously from House Hawkwood, but he wants to have his power base as something above everything else. So your group questing knights will have a group of questing, an entourage of questing merchants and questing church priests. And so while you may come from different factions of the nobles, the League and the church, you're bound together by the fact that you're all actually operating for the Emperor. And that's cool, because it gives you your group of players a little bit of leverage when they need it, because they can basically march around and go that they're working on the orders of the church, and they can show their papers and the seal of the Emperor, and everyone goes, oh, okay, or kill them. So that's kind of cool, and it's the fact that it allows them to requisition things like a spaceship if they need it. Cool. Anything more to say there with the main factions of humanity?
Well, we've talked about the factions a bit. We can now, of course, there are aliens in this, and if you want to play an alien character, there is a whole bunch of there is. We can get into that if you like. This could be a very long night, Chris.
Shall we do the rundown? Okay, score bites. They're basically human-sized insects.
Bugs, really? Yeah.
They're most closely related to, say, mosquitoes. I've had a player play as one. They're fun. They're great. They're weird. They have their own world. They live in a hive mind, but some score bites get cut off from the hive mind. You have the Atari, who are avian. They're basically birdmen, capable of flight, live in a kind of a place where they fly around lots. Not much more to say about them. The alien, I'll be honest, the aliens I didn't use too much in my setting, because I think sometimes they're a bit too... It's that Firefly thing. Sometimes you don't want to get into the thing of the Star Trek thing of it's an alien is a human with a weird face. At least the aliens
I'd agree with you in that. It was always something I would always, keep the aliens either... They would pop up as flavor, but they kind of weren't the main point. Whenever I would play Star Wars, it would be something like that. I'd end up with a bunch of player characters. Everybody wants to play an alien, and there was no humans. So it's like, no, kind of humans are the point, or at least that's the way I play it. And I try to steer people away from aliens. Yeah, they can be, can't they? Yeah. It's like
the Ganaka are basically sentient apes. And they're apparently mechanics, and they do practical jokes. So they're a bit like
they're comedy. Yeah. Well, they can be.
They're the Fading Suns version of the Chikaro in Warhammer 40,000. Yeah, I'm showing my.
Oh God, I remember them. Yeah.
Knowledge of that setting, because obviously I played that game far too. The Heronum. Hold on, I can't remember these guys. What was special about? Oh, they're your reptiles. They're your classic reptiles. Not much more to say about them. Native to a particular world, blah blah blah.
Yeah, also remember in this setting,
aliens don't have much position.
Aliens have very few rights, and if you show up in particular worlds, you will get pulled to pieces. You will get torn apart. So you really have to be careful when you're an alien and where you travel. It's very much humanity's world, and the setting doesn't spend a lot of time going into... There is one other big faction of aliens we'll get to in a second, but they're kind of the one only big alien faction. But it's very much about humans and about people, and the aliens tend not to get around so much when they're leaving their homeworlds. What else have we got?
I was going to say we've got the Oroyum, who are aquatic sentients. I'm trying to remember what the how they drew them. They looked kind of like, what do they kind of look like? They weren't cephalopods. That would have been a bit too crazy. But yeah, again, they mostly, I'm trying to think, they might be a bit kind of like fish, kind of frog-like. Not quite Admiral Akbar. But, you get the idea. The Shantor, I never thought...
I never used them either. You can have 30/30 flashbacks from Lone Star, if you remember that children's television show.
Brave Star.
Brave Star, I'm sorry, it was Brave Star, wasn't Lone Star.
The Shantor are basically sentient horses. And, they have technology which kind of like because they don't have proper arms, they've somehow made technology that binds onto the back. I never really got how they worked or the reasoning for them. And I would say that they're meant to kind of, they draw upon the idea of like they've been forced onto reservations. So there's this whole kind of alludes to kind of the, America's colonization and treatment of Native Americans. And of course, I guess that also has an allusion to the same thing that happened historically anywhere else in the world, wherever anyone from Britain or Europe went. So, it's, I think...
If you really want to put them into your game, use it your peril, because, the potential for unwanted comedy is there. You'll get a million Mr. Ed jokes.
Yeah, it's not. I think you could get the same flavor with the whole idea of like an alien race forced onto a reservation and do that kind of discussion and kind of look at the implications of colonization and look at like what's happened in our own history and use it as a proper form of discussion and do some solid role play from that. I think there's actually a lot of good you could do from that. It'd be really interesting, but I think I would not have the Shantor as being so Native American. I would try and make them a bit more unique. And because that's the problem, is sometimes this is such a problem in sci-fi stuff, is that often we're limited by our own experiences in writing. So sometimes some races just come off as let's put X group of humans on planet Y and recast as Animal Z. And it's just like, oh god. Okay, the two more interesting ones are the Urban and the Ka. So the Urban are one of the races known as the Children of having close connection to the Anukai. They are the Lightbringers. These are basically pacifist kind of. I want to say they're kind of the answer to elves in space.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, because the Ka are the darkest. Are they the darkest? Oh no, wait.
No,
the pale ones.
the Urban are the darker skinned ones. The Ukara are the light skinned ones because they live underground. There, if you want to stretch the elf analogy, they're your drow.
Yeah. And they have like scarification, and they went to war with humanity and the church, and that's where they play into it, because they went to war with humanity, and the church bound humanity together to fight against them. Yeah, they're okay. And then we're finally these are the alien races that kind of basically fall under control by the humans. We're onto the Voroks, who are they're your six-limbed werewolves. They're not werewolves. They turn into humans, but they basically are your Krynos form.
Your 12-foot tall, six-legged Krynos form werewolf. If you really want it, once again, I would argue, let a player play one at your peril.
Yes.
Because they will just, the stats on them are quite crazy. They will tear apart. They will go through anything like a wood chipper.
I think if you're going to play them again, I would try and play them to try and get that element of like the Klingons into the setting, because it's all this. They're violent, but they have honor, and that's I think important. So yeah, those are the smaller alien races. Obviously, there's other factions. The other alien races we've not spoken about, and for some reason it's not on here.
If we're talking player races, then of course we have the very big one, who are the Vow.
Yes. They're possibly even more like Shogunate Japan.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're interesting because they have ridiculous technology. They're basically your Eldar of the Fading Suns, because they have access to like plasma technology of a ridiculous level, and can do, and they're also very much in tune with the ancient technology of the jump gates.
Yeah. So when humanity first encountered the Vow, or at least an alien race that was subjugated by the Vow, they sort of showed up, said, "We'll take this planet," and the alien race that lived there said, "We kind of want you to leave, please." And they went, "Silly aliens." Then next thing I know, a massive Vow warship showed up, destroyed their fleet in orbit, and butchered them all, and then told them, "This is Vow space, never come back." And that was pretty much what happened with the Vow. Everyone just kind of sat there and went, maybe the Vow, then the Vow were always quite mysterious. They were fleshed out a bit. Which I'm not going to get into too much because it's a little bit of spoiler territory. There's a source book specifically for the Vow. But there was always the question of why don't the Vow potentially have enough firepower and enough manpower to conquer humanity? They just, for whatever reason, don't.
Yeah. So there's the Vow, and then I think really the other things to say about are the fact we have the final race, which we should really point out, is known as the Symbiote, and they basically have control of 4 worlds, known as Chernobog, Absolution, Daishan, and Stigmata. Stigmata is a world which is I can't remember who exactly has control over that one. It doesn't really matter. But the fact is that world is at constant warfare. So and it's kind of like the last world that symbiotes have, and it's their foothold into the known worlds. So the symbiotes are parasitic entities attempting to break through into human space and possess its inhabitants, and turn them into hive mind slaves. The only way really to get rid of them is to use fire, to get rid of the infestation, or to use, theurgy.
How would you describe them? I suppose it would almost be they're not quite sort of Tyranids. They're more they're almost like sort of bio-Borg if you're going to borrow something from another. If you're going to borrow something from Star Trek. So what sort of happened with them was...
I was going to say, before you went on with that, I was going to say that, I'll tell you what they're closer to. You're right with the bio-Borg, you're right with, like, the Tyranids in that sense. But I would also say there's the element of body horror from The Thing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, I was going to go there.
Yeah. Because a person could be infected and still know who they are and eventually get consumed into the race. Yeah. And they've got an interesting history of their origin.
There was a native sort of symbiotic organism which humanity hadn't come across. I think they were in the sort of in the unexplored regions of the planet, and then that was what happened when this symbiotic race ran into a human psychic, and then of course shit got real.
Yeah, and somehow the Vow are able to keep it off out of their jump web. So and the Vow have quite a lot of worlds. It'd be an interesting thing, I'm just going to point out now, because we haven't actually mentioned this about the jump gates and the worlds. The proximity of one jump gate to another, so if, say, let's take for example on the jump web thing, Byzantium Secundus, which is the main home world of the Empire, throne world, has a connection to the world of Aragon. It also has a connection to the world of Maddox. Now, just because each of those worlds are one jump away from Byzantium Secundus, it actually has no meaning to the real world proximity, the real space proximity between worlds. So, the jump web has no relation at all to where stars actually hang in the sky. Cool. Okay, that was just a sidebar there. And I think the next thing we can say, which kind of rounds up races and factions, we've got the barbarians. So as we said, we've got the Kurgan Caliphate, who are at constant war with the Hazat, and are essentially your Arabic kind of pre-Islam Persians. Not much more to say about them. That's kind of how, that kind of how they fit. And, there's they've got a few worlds that you can go adventuring in. And then there's the Voldrop Star Nation, which, again, you have to kind of approach all this with tongue-in-cheek and to use it in the right way. So they do raids on the Hawkwood, and they're basically your space Vikings. I don't know. I mean, that's what I mean. Sometimes it's the same with any sci-fi setting. Why sci-fi is sometimes harder you want to portray in a way that gives the right sense of immersion, and sometimes certain races and factions break the immersion because they are a pastiche, of something.
Absolutely. And I mean, particularly when they've made this design choice in the game to say that, technology's gone to a certain place and stopped. And a lot of times you have writers go, okay, the way they design races and factions is how has the technology affected the people? So you have you have things like a society of, things like the Borg, where you have, we've got a technological hive mind. So that defines, so their technology defines them. But when when that's not a factor, like in this, they then have to come up with something else. And sometimes it can be hit and miss, and sometimes unfortunately it's a little bit more of a miss.
Okay. What should we move on to next? As we said, shall we say about, the more unique elements in the setting, or at least the other interesting elements that there are. So we've got, shall we talk about, I don't know where to start. Shall we talk about heresies and demons and the occult? Because that's something, obviously, which we've talked about alien races, and we've talked about, star travel and all that stuff. And that's all kind of like typical sci-fi bread and butter, no matter what you're playing, like whether it be Star Trek, Star Wars, or Firefly, and all those things. But where I would say Fading Sun starts becoming the cousin to the World of Darkness is when you start getting into the elements of the occult and the stuff to do with heresies within the setting.
Yeah, okay, let's talk a little bit about that.
So, the occult. So, the occult has, as we've mentioned, the church has access to rituals of faith called theurgy.
Yeah.
And that's, there's nothing really more to say about that. That's very simple. They can call down holy fire, they can do healing, they can do divination. That's pretty simple. You then have psychic powers and psionics, and that's kind of a typical thing of a sci-fi setting that, humans have advanced so far that they're beginning to evolve. And of course then other races have their own kind of, or groups have their own kind of flavor of theurgy or their own flavor of psychic powers. So, the other things in the occult, we've got the Sarafism, which is this religious cult where people are addicted to going through the jump gates without the jump drives or the Sarasa dampers. So, Pete, what can you tell us about that, or what you think about this?
Well, we covered it a little bit initially. I know we were a little bit hodgepodge when describing the background. Let me think. Sathra cult. Sorry, Chris, not a hell of a lot, mate.
Okay, it says here, the thing it says is that, obviously it's this addictive, ecstatic sensation you gain from travelling through a jump gate.
Yeah.
So obviously there's this whole thing that people do it and they breach both holy law and technological law to do this. So these people are at the fringe. It's like a drug to them. The thing where this gets dangerous is the fact that apparently it can induce psychic powers in the users.
Yeah.
And the other thing then is how those group of people then interact with the rest of society, and how that interacts with what the gates are doing. So, because there's this whole thing of like the fading suns, of why is that happening and how that relates to what humanity's doing and how humans are evolving and their interaction with the jump gates themselves. And so there's the question of how Sarafism is related to all of that. So that's something that can be quite, explored in a game, where you're maybe hunting down these cults of Serafists. But they're kind of like, I guess you could say they're not villains in the classic way evil. They're just doing things because they want to do it, rather than because they're not doing it because they hate people. They're doing it because they want to just do something because they love doing it, and they're not out to hurt people. Whereas you have antinomy, which is obviously covers the broad range of demons and necromancy, ancestor worship, and of course conversing with the creatures that lurk in the darkness between the stars, because that's a very big thing in Fading Sun. So, so again, if there's theurgy, then there's also basically demon worship in the setting, and there are rules for demons and possession and the powers that cultists can get from that. And they can basically be, venerating these almost, I would guess you would say, Lovecraftian entities. So you can really inject some of that kind of Cthulhu, kind of scale mythos into it. And, some of the races actually do touch on that with the gods that they venerate. And related to that then is the fact that you have these, what do they call? They call them space kraken, don't they?
I believe so.
So you have to be careful when traveling in space, because obviously there's these apparently giant, what are they? I guess you could say Cthulhu level entities, kind of that kind of scale, and they can obviously destroy ships and consume them, and the way to ward them off is using artifacts created by the Anukai. So these you can basically take from a world, say a statue carved by the Anukai, and attach it to your ship. And some church ships do this, or some noble ships have this, and it acts as a ward to these cosmic entities. And related then to that, there are numerous heresies. So there's the Anukai cults, there's incarnates who are waiting for the rebirth of Zebulon, or are looking for like the actual Pancreator to manifest in the world. There's people that are obsessed with technology, and so undergoing like full cyberization. And then, of course, there's the one that relates to the Emperor coming to power, which is the whole idea that since Emperor Alexis Hawkwood took power, for the first time, a new star has been seen in the sky, burning brightly. So apparently that's a portent of things to come. Wow. Is there anything more you want to say on occult or heresies or other creatures that you can inject into the setting? I think you can put vampires, you can put zombies and ghosts into it, obviously with their own kind of...
I think a lot of those things exist in some form or another. They're in a few of the different books. I think you've pretty much covered it quite well there, mate. Alright, so what else can we talk about? Let's take a little bit of a breath. Shall we talk about... now, so that's... We've given you a that's the setting in what is now almost a 2-hour nutshell. Should we talk a little bit about the system that they developed for the game?
Yeah, the system is, I guess at the time was quite different maybe to a few. Where to begin with this? So it's a... do you want to start with this? And then, if you've got... Because I haven't actually got one of the rule books open in front of me.
Oh, nice one. So we'll talk a little bit about it. It was called the victory point system, and so the deal with the victory point system is initially you're rolling a d20, and I believe it's you take attribute plus skill, and you're looking to roll as close to that number without going over. Depending on how well you roll, you'll pick up a number of successes. Of course, the more successes, the better. Am I wrong when I say, what is it, rolling now which way is rolling the critical? Is it rolling the 1 or is it rolling the 20?
A critical success is rolling directly on the target number.
Yeah, that doubles your successes, I believe.
Yeah, and that doubles your success. And then, so obviously the number of victory points you could get was determined by, and then of course, you can do a critical fail. And a critical fail is where you roll...
That's a 1, I believe.
A critical fail is a straight 20. Because remember, you want to roll... Your target is... Obviously, if you've got a high attribute and a high skill, then you've got a high target number. So you want to roll... You either want to roll equal to or under the target number.
That's right,
to succeed. But you would have a critical fail if you roll a 20, and you would have an automatic success if you rolled a 1. Now, let me just open up my Fading Suns.
Because we were discussing this ourselves a little bit while ago. Now, the system's very good, but I think you had the criticism that the critical, the 20, shows up far too often.
It's a common issue, and there's a few fixes you can do for it. So you could go to a 2d10 system, which obviously gives you a nice bell curve. And bell curve's great. Or you could do something that's a bit more, say, equivalent to almost kind of like the version of doing a chance die. So if you roll a 20, you have the chance of a critical fail, and then you need to roll again, and if you fail on that, then it's a critical fail. So it means that if you're high in skill, your chance of a critical fail will diminish. So it's basically rolling twice type thing. And as you said, so the victory point system means that you will get depending upon how well you succeed, you get a number of successes. So if we look at the victory chart, where is it? I can't find the dice rolling system in the book.
So,
have you got the book? Have you got the book there? Like, I'm trying to explain like the how you determine your victory points based upon what your target number is.
I believe it's on the character sheet, isn't it? Yep, it's on the character sheet.
It is. Okay.
What were you after, mate?
Hold on, it's on the character sheet at the back.
The victory chart, yeah, it's there.
Yeah. I know, I've got a different character sheet, that's why, in this book. Doesn't help. So, okay, so say you've got like say my skill that I'm trying to beat, my target number that I'm rolling is, a 12. Okay. So how many victory points would I get if I rolled an 11?
You would get 3.
And then how many would I get if I rolled a 6?
You would get 2.
2. So it means that if you, it's got different scales, doesn't it? So,
yeah.
So if you beat it by 1 or 2 points, you just get 1 victory point and no bonus dice. If you beat it by 3 to 5, you get 1 victory point, you get a bonus dice. If you beat the difficulty by 6 to 8, you get 2 victory points and plus 2 dice to whatever your next thing is, be it combat or the next skill. Yeah. And it's that simple, actually. And that works really well because the thing to note here is that basic skills are rolled, as it says, with a D20 or the modified version that you use. And damage, though, in combat is done using D6s, so it's a straight kind of, it's straight like 5, 6 is a damage. So you basically work out that based upon how many victory points you get and thus how many victory dice you get, and the strength of the weapon and the strength of your character, that gives you X number of D6s to roll as damage against your opponent. You could also do some further things to dice rolls, which is where you can do accents. Now, accents uses a weird point. You can basically imagine that you spend a weird point, it's like spending a willpower point, okay? And this basically means you can boost up or down the difficulty of the target number. And the amount you can do that by is, is based upon, I believe, your skill itself, when you do an accent. Yeah. You can boost the target number by an amount equal to your character skill. So say you've got a target number of 12 and your skill rating is 6. You can actually make the target number then 18, or you can make the target number 6. So you can make it easier or harder. And you would think, why would I want to make it harder? Or why would I make it easier? Well, if it's something you definitely need to succeed on, you make it easier because then you're more likely of passing, right? But it means that you will get back less victory points and less victory dice for your success. So it's that whole thing, like you've made it easier, but you're just not getting back the most for it. And then if you make it harder, you obviously are getting back more victory. You're going to get more victory points for your dice roll. So it's an interesting system in that sense. What do you think of the system then, Pete, with how that generally works?
I'll be honest with you. I've always been a huge fan of the game. I never really got a chance to really stretch the system's legs. I was quite happy with the victory point system back in the day. Only I never really quite road tested it. I don't know. When you've played Fading Suns, were you a player or did you end up?
Oh no, I ran it. Yeah.
How do you think it went? Do you think was combat okay? It didn't bog down?
No, I mean it's fairly the skill. Okay, so skill system's fine. Character creation is a wonderful thing for the system because character creation uses what they call it
a life path or something.
A life path, yeah.
I think I didn't end up playing. When I played it, we were using first edition, so it didn't have the life path system.
Okay. The life path system is excellent because it's essentially kind of adding lots and lots of careers onto your character until you end up with a character that's fully fleshed out. And I think it gives a really nice idea of who your character is. Skills, as I said, skills are simple enough, and that was never a problem. As for combat, I don't remember it ever really getting too bogged down. I mean, as I say, it was very simple to hit, to roll that. So if I just skip through to find the combat system, just to refresh my memory on a few little pointers on this. So obviously there's the whole thing that you could have multiple actions, and if you had multiple actions, it meant that your modifier to hitting got harder. So that's fairly simple. You had an initiative system, which, I think it basically says you would roll each turn, and I didn't bother because it kind of got annoying in that sense. You have multiple different types of attacks you can do, so you can do kicks and so forth, and then dodging was essentially meant you had contested rolls. So the whole point is then, if you have a contested roll, depending upon how well you both succeed, then you compare victory points, and then that gives you a judgment of how well the one person has beaten the other, and then if it's a tie, you then look at the person's skill rating, and then if that's tied, you then look at their attribute rating. So, you've got quite a few things to kind of break ties, which is good, because tiebreak is always crap. And, you can choose to accent attacks, so you could always play risky. You could make your roll to hit harder, so you'd actually get more victory points. So that was, if you wanted to deliver the killing blow, you had the option of how to do that. And so that was all fairly simple. So you have the contested roll, you then work out the victory points, you then take from the victory points how many dice you get as your damage modifier, and if you get critical success, you get more, you get more dice, and you roll those d6 in as damage dice. So a weapon, say, does 3 damage dice, you succeeded and you've got like an extra 2, so you roll those. On a 1, 2, 3, 4, it causes a point of damage. On a 5, 6, it doesn't. And then, of course, once you've worked out how many damage points you've done, you roll a number of d6 for armor. And on a 1, 2, 3, 4, the armor, removes a point of damage. So the way the combat system, that already sounds very simple. The things where it gets complicated maybe is martial arts and, combat stuff. And that's complicated always in any game system, is where you add in extra forms of how you can do attacks. But really, it wasn't too bad. It got interesting because obviously there's lots of actions for fencing, because fencing is a important element of the setting, because it's the whole slow blade penetrates the shield. So to explain that, in Dune you have the whole thing, they have these shields, and slow attacks would penetrate the shields, like gunfire, because would be bounced off, because it's based upon the kinetic energy of an attack. So nobles would generally the types to carry around small they would look like amulets or bracelets or pendants, and they would activate them, and they would have a shield, protecting them.
Yeah.
And that's meant in game you could have one player, a noble, quite happily run down a corridor at someone who has like a submachine gun doing full auto, and all the bullets just bouncing off them, because he's got this, this armor that's really good at that. But when it comes to fighting, to fencing, like hand-to-hand combat, or in duels between nobles, fencing was important, because the aim was actually to deal lots of hits that did little damage, because you wanted to be able to penetrate the shield. So you have that element to the game. So it meant that if your attack did, say, like less than 3 dice of damage or something like that, you can it wouldn't get stopped by the shield. So, as I said, you would have drawn out fencing, and so there's a whole thing with like fencing actions like thrust, parry, slash, and all these things. They would have bonuses, and so you could actually do some nice drawn out fencing combat between characters. So you could do it as kind of like mind games between the combatants. So and of course there's lots of guns, and guns range from simple bolt-action rifles all the way up to, machine guns, to laser weaponry, to plasma weaponry, to insane, neuro disruptors.
Insane Second Republic, insane Second Republic legacy weapons, which are just godly.
And again, there's a whole load of firearm actions and skills. And again, some of these actions are only accessible if you have the right level of the skill to do it. So you can gain. So it just means it gives you a few more options, like you're quicker at reloading and so forth. And damage was fairly simple, with in a kind of a typical kind of White Wolf health levels kind of sense. The only other stats really to talk about is that in second edition, and that's maybe been fixed I think the one thing they fixed in the recent kind of revised version.
Are they actually calling it a third edition, or is it a revised edition?
It's a revised. I wouldn't call it a third edition because it doesn't really change the rules. It's you used to have a balance between these attributes like faith and ego and stuff like that. So these are like attributes which are a balance between two concepts. And those are related to psychic powers. But yeah, I would say combat isn't actually that difficult. I mean, if you have a fixed initiative, if you roll initiative at the start of combat, then different attacks mean you are able to act faster or slower. So the way I would run it is that you would roll initiative, and then I would go for a classic World of Darkness kind of sense where the person with the lowest initiative declares that action first. So they could choose an action that meant that they could technically go before someone else because they're acting faster because they've chosen a faster attack. But then that means other characters who've got the higher initiative could choose actions that respond to that. So they could go, well, I'll let them go before me, but I'll do a more powerful attack. That means I go slower. So there's that kind of balance, which I think is the fairest way to run it. So there's a few house rules I did that made it a bit more playable in places. But otherwise, there's a ton of different weapons you can get. And as I say, it ranges from basic crossbows and bows to slug guns to energy weapons to heavy weapons with missile launchers to various wonderful types of armor, energy shields, and obviously you get into the only thing which I would say that's missing in the game, and again there's some good house rules you can find out there, is space combat. And the one thing that space combat's missing is rules for maneuvers and sensors and where the enemy is. So I think you can take some inspiration maybe from some other sci-fi games out there that have a good kind of spaceship focus and introduce some alternative rules for adding in more detailed spaceship maneuvers. Because one maneuver that I used that's in a set of house rules was that you could do that you could make your spaceship do a roll, because obviously the spaceships are defended by shields, energy shields, and so if you do a roll, it kind of spreads the damage you're taking from a laser blast, and it means then the shields regenerate faster rather than one shield just being fully overloaded. So there's just little bits like that I think I was hoping for, and why I was hoping for an official third edition, that they would overhaul space combat and actually make it more detailed, because I was going to say that's where troop play comes in.
Do you know if it linked in at all with Noble Armada? Could you fire up the Noble Armada rules and use that for spaceship combat?
There's no reason why you can't.
Yeah.
And I think there is some overlap that you can do that. I've just never had the option of doing that with the miniatures available to me.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, I would say the rules are actually fairly simple. I guess that where it gets maybe a little bit more involved is when you're into the realms of magic and rituals. So the occult obviously covers psionics, and your character can go slowly insane as he's using it, or you've got churchly rituals, and there's a definite difference in flavour between things. So psionics seem a bit more immediate, whereas say churchly rituals, theurgy, feels a little slower. but it can be a lot more useful in the long term. And then there's the dark side of theurgy, so you can get hubris, which are like, you know, the dark twin of it. So these are like the really evil spells. And then that really, looking through the book, there's actually a really good, in the second edition book, there's a really good example of play, which I think if someone reads through, really gives a good idea of how the game should feel. Obviously there's a load of technology, and technology can range from being as, like, you know, backpacks, which are like, so you can scan things. Like your tricorder could be like a huge actual backpack rather than a handheld thing. And obviously there's vehicles, and really the core book game is just missing more detail on, say, vehicles and stuff. And but it can play really well, and you can get the idea of like pirates, you know, attacking your little ship as it's flitting about. The storyteller section I think is quite good. I mean, in second edition, so it talks about it talks about dramas and the fact that you should be collaboratively trying to tell an epic tale. Like, your characters are notable characters who will be spoken of down the ages, and so it kind of gives you that idea that you're actually all collaboratively, going through the tomes and talking about the story of these characters that have been written somewhere by some, historian. Which kind of fed into the way I did my write-ups for my Chronicle for it. So one of the characters, he had a valet, and I always wrote it from the perspective of the valet. So he'd always be like, "Oh, my master has got us all into trouble once again," or "that damned insect." So it was always from his journal, and it added to the actual play. Obviously, added to how everyone was playing, because they all engaged in that collaborative vision of the game. And the whole question then is about the games mastering section talks about how to get the scale right and what type of stories to tell, and to introduce horror or romance or conspiracies and scandals and Byzantine politics, and the difference between a small chronicle and an epic, and memorable characters. So they're really trying to lay on thick how you should be telling this epic space opera. And there's a good amount of NPCs, like some good starting NPCs in the core book, and some weird creatures and demons and so forth. And that feeds in well with so the core book, the second edition core book has a short introductory story you can run, which I can't remember what it's called.
The Electo's Journals?
It's set on Diplomatic Community, which is set on.
That's the one. I'm sorry, yeah.
I've run it twice, and it's perfectly good. And I use it just to kind of paint rather large pictures of how nobles would have estates and how they would travel around them, be it on horse or on I think one person, the pilot in one group had a grav bike. So I've run it as a one shot, and I've also run it as part of a chronicle, as the start of a chronicle that led into one of the books, which is called Complete Pandemonium, that had 3 stories, which I also ran. And then also the thing with the storytelling section that they get into is something known as the passion play, which is an interesting concept. So what this is, and I'm going to read it directly from the book, because it's an interesting concept which I think can be applied to different roleplay games. So it's a futuristic passion play, for it's a story about the sufferings and triumphs of mankind over in a medieval space setting a millennia from now. So in addition to using the term as a description of the setting, Fading Suns allows you an optional mode of play called the passion play roleplay. Not all games need to use this element, but it can be useful. So it's meant to get into how over the top and epic the game is. So the idea is that you play through the game, and one key importance of the passion play is the theme of the epic or the drama, and that the Games Master isn't just using it, it's kind of like a bit of metagaming. So it doesn't tie up, so let me get this right. So at the end of a game session, the Games Master and players review recent events and weave a morality play from them, deciding the meaning of what may have just been random, spontaneous choices. So essentially, it's telling you to like imagine like the gameplay of the players is imagine the gameplay of the players is being reviewed by some historians or being told by a noble to his children, and that then you are those people in that time period later after all these events have occurred, and you're reading into all these events to find some deeper meaning. So it's kind of novel, and it means then that you can actually have players feel compelled to play towards the theme of the Chronicle and gain bonuses to their dice pools when doing that. So it's this idea that they're actually playing to some sort of predestined, goal. So yeah, you can look for like some grand themes and how you slowly reveal these themes and you dish them out, and yeah, it just adds something different to it. And I think it adds a way of like post game, you can be sat around and everyone could just be chilling out, and you're talking about the game, but in character as these characters like 100 years later. Like not your actual player characters, as other characters 100 years later talking about the grand exploit of this party of questing knights.
Yeah. One of the things which I also kind of want to lay down is each book begins with the quite typical chapter of there's like an opening story. Now what actually I think is very, very good about these is, as to the best of my knowledge, they're all written by Bill Bridges, who's actually pretty good. Who's actually a pretty good novel writer himself. He's written some. I think he was behind some of the really good ones for. There's some of the good short stories, and I think he's now penning a new novel for Werewolf the Apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And there's like an ongoing story between each of them following this character Alecto. I get the impression also that I think it's from the examples as well that this is Bill Bridges kind of, in a similar way that you were, this is Bill Bridges writing up their ongoing Fading Suns chronicle. So it's Alecto sort of telling the story of him and a noble's entourage as they sort of travel from planet to planet. And each one will kind of introduce whatever faction that the book's about. So the opening fiction for the book specifically about the Merchant League, Merchants of the Jump Web, that one has them traveling to Leagueheim, and they meet a few different League characters. It's all really fun. It all kind of becomes sort of one overall big story. It's probably my favorite example of in-game fiction. I know a lot of the times when I open up a new role-playing game book and here's the obligatory chapter of fiction, and sometimes it's not all that great. So sometimes I'll just kind of skip past this. But no, in each time in Fading Suns, it's almost a case of, oh great, a new Fading Suns book was out. I'll get to read another chapter of fiction. It was a really good way to do it.
No, it's so I've read some of that, and I've read the collection of short stories. Stories?
The Sinful Stars. Yeah,
it's good.
I've got that floating around somewhere. I moved house at the beginning of the year, and it's disappeared. I was really annoyed. Because I hadn't read it on about sort of 10, 12 years. I was looking forward to sitting down and reading through it again.
It's decent because I think it helps flesh out a lot of the worlds and things which obviously Bill Bridges had in mind. So it really helps just kind of you get a feel for the setting a lot better. Yeah. And I think that's where this game in-game text really does help. Because to be honest, sometimes I don't really read a lot sometimes on some game text because I think this is why I prefer maybe what you get with the God Machine Chronicle, for example. The God Machine Chronicle anthology is interesting because they're kind of like the bit that happens at the start of an episode of the X-Files or Fringe. So something weird happens.
The cold open, the teaser,
Yeah, and then obviously but it's not the story the players get involved in because they're getting involved. They're dealing with the aftermath of the event, and that I like. So those are useful. I think it's when you get kind of like the more involved kind of with particular named characters, especially in like say vampire and werewolf and stuff, especially in like old school like Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse and Mage, because often it's like that's not quite how I would run things, and so it's it can sometimes be a bit too bombastic and a bit too involved in its own plot to be really of any useful help to like a GM. The Electos journals are really cool. I think that pretty much gets us to the end.
I think we've spent a good 2 hours discussing it. We can talk a little bit about what's out there and what books people can grab. So as I said before, this is a really well fleshed out game world. I mean, when it was at its height, it was a pretty popular game, and as I said, there's something about like sort of 25, maybe even 30 books if you don't count the compilation books that are out there. So what do we recommend people picking up? I think if you're looking just to get the core book, there is the second edition core book's pretty much the best one that you can get.
Yeah, this is what I'm going to go. I'm going to be a critic. I would say don't even bother with.
You can be critical.
I can be a critic. I wouldn't even bother with the revised version that's turned up. I think you can easily house rule and fix some of the things which are the fixes that are in the revised one. The reason I say that is, if you're going to get Fading Sun 2nd edition and you want to do print on demand, get that one. Because the print on demand, or if you buy the other one, the revised one, by, it was Red Brick and it's now the new version of FASA.
Which kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit, because it's a bunch of people trading under a name, which, you know what I mean? It's like, guys, FASA was FASA, and you guys are now, I don't know, for me it's a little bit disingenuous.
Yeah.
If people are going to say, oh wow, FASA are putting books out again, it's like, well, not quite, actually.
Exactly. And so I don't like obviously I had a review copy, sent by Drive Through RPG of that book, and I don't like the layout, and it's so much as just it's a complete reprinting. Nothing's really added other than 1 or 2 minor fixes to rules, and I would say it's a disservice, because I know there was a lot of, I'm gonna be open about it, there was a lot of hoo-ha about the proposed 3rd edition that was being planned and how that got axed, and a writer had a lot of his work just never saw the light of day. And proposed changes he was doing to the system and how to push on the setting to be significant changes to make it more interesting again and living didn't come to pass. And instead we get this halfway, it's not even a halfway house, it's just the book with a new print job, and the layout is for a more kind of Reader's Digest size, so it's kind of like A5, and I'm just like, fuck, no.
Oh, really?
It's lame, I don't like it. So anyway, other books, so Fading Sun 2nd edition, get that one.
I would also say that they also published a couple of compilation books. So, of course, there's a book for the nobles, there's a book for the church, but they published a compilation of both books. So, I'd suggest picking that one up. Kind of what's it called? I think it's Lords of the Realm. It's over on my shelf. I may have to get up and go have a look at it. I've got some double ups here there. They did a bunch of little books which were sort of planet guides. And they combined them so you could pick up the Dakardos Fife, which talks you through all the various different Dakardos books. You can pick up the Hawkwood Fifes. There's a quite funny little gag where among the Hawkwood worlds, there's a planet called Gwyneth, which has a continent called Paltrow. So ha ha ha. But you can pick up one called Worlds of the Realm, which is all those compilation books, stuck into a nice big fat package. In this instance, I'm not quite sure. I think the entire back catalogue is available as PDFs from Drive Through RPG. I don't think you can get them all as print on demand. I know there's some of them scattered around. Like, there was the one book there's a couple of books which I don't have, which were some of the newer releases from Red Brick, which I think they're available on Hulu. I think they did a Church Fifes book, which I was looking at a while back. I think you can get that as a print on demand through, not Hulu, sorry, Lulu, whatever it was called, which I think you can pick up through that one. In this instance, I'd say, eBay is your friend. You you can find a lot of stuff out there cheaply. Different stuff shows up at different times. For some reason, Merchants of the Jump Web, which is the Merchant League book, I could not find it for love or money. And then next thing I knew, there was 5 copies, just all on eBay at the same time. So. See how you go. A few of them are rarer than others. I'd only ever seen one. There's Legions of the Empire, which is a book regarding the specific Imperial military. I only ever saw one copy of that in the wild back in 1996, and I never even saw it on eBay until I was quite lucky. I found it being sold by a second-hand seller at a recent convention here in Melbourne, and practically fell out of my skin and just snapped that one up.
Yeah, I would say the main ones to try and get hold of, I would go with these. So the second edition, which is Holistic Design, second edition revised, which is basically second edition reprinted with a few with minor changes, which was done by Red Brick / FASA. Then there's revised edition, which is the Fading Suns player guide. Don't get that one. Lords and Priests, get that. Get the Merchants, the Merchants book. Again, you have to be sometimes a bit careful with some books because they use it refers to first edition rules rather than the second edition rules.
Yeah.
But don't worry about that. I mean, it's just setting material and it's easy enough to fix.
We should probably talk a little bit about, and look, it's a little bit debatable because the people involved, so Andrew Greenberg and Bill Bridges, who are still around and they're still active in the community, they've actually come out and kind of said what happened. There's an article over on RPGNet sort of discussing what happened to holistic design. Once again, I'm not quite sure how to trust it because, I don't think the man who wrote it, was taking it from a lot of primary sources. But it just kind of says that I think holistic design kind of went down, after the D20 boom and bust, in the early 2000s. So there's a few Fading Suns books floating around because the argument can be made that the background of Fading Suns, you can, it potentially lends itself to the Dungeons and Dragons D20 setting. Look, I was never a Dungeons and Dragons fan to begin with, so of course I'd say, no. There's a bunch of different D20 Fading Suns books floating around. If that's your bag, go for it. I was kind of never quite I was never all that besmirched as, go and dig them up. They're on my list of books to pick up eventually, should I see them on eBay for $1 or something.
I would also say you could easily, the people that feel creative out there, if they wanted to use a different system from Victory Point, you could easily take, if you've got enough World of Darkness books, especially New World of Darkness, I would say.
Yeah,
you could easily port it up. Second Sight would make it easy.
Second Sight makes it easy. The add-on packs to World of Darkness mirrors. Yes. So the science fiction and the cyberpunk add-on PDF add-ons that they, you could hack something out very, very simply if you know NWAD backwards like I do. Because Fading Suns, I'll come out and say it's my absolute favorite science fiction role-playing game, and it's one of the ones that I've never been able to have the chance. I never had the chance to run it. I've always had a pack of players, and I went, let's do Fading Suns, and they went, what's Fading Suns?
Yeah, I got into the reason I grabbed it was because when I got into role-playing, I started off with D&D, and quickly D&D Basic box set, which was like 18th edition, I think. So that was like back in 1995. So I then got from that into Star Wars 2nd edition revised when West End Games were doing it. And of course that's 1996 before any of the pre-trilogy stuff. So to run that game for me, I just bought some Star Wars books and, you had the expanded universe and you basically had a big unwritten portions of the setting to run. And it was great fun at the time. I learned a lot from the 2nd edition revised book. Like, that has a brilliant GM section ever. If anyone wants to read something, how to get into role running games, that was brilliant. Thank you, Arcane Magazine, for telling me which game to buy. Then, from that, I went into Vampire the Masquerade, because the point was I basically got, and obviously I've played ridiculous amounts of Games Workshop games, all the way from, Titan Legions upwards, and, Space Marine, and every Games Workshop game ever.
Because for you it wasn't an adventure, it was a job, right?
Yeah, I became a job as well because I worked for Games Workshop as well. So I became really, a sci-fi that was to me my sci-fi setting, but there wasn't really. Star Wars basically burnt me eventually on wanting to run sci-fi settings, because either you've got that or
for everyone, yeah.
Or I just didn't feel like something that I could grab, and then I found Fading Suns, so I was like, that's the one. And it was basically kind of like 40k but less intimidating to kind of like run. So, yeah. And the other thing there is also on Drive Thru RPG, if you're into LARP, there is a PDF for Passion Play, for live action roleplay. And the thing is, I can't bring myself to do Vampire LARP, alright? Because I just, it's that suspension of disbelief, and I think I just have an issue with that, and there's an element of control, but I think Passion Play could work really well.
Yeah, once again, I would love to try Passion Play. I'm not so sure about me and LARPing, because I don't know if I'm just, because I was into Vampire LARP back in the day. I don't know if I can sort of, I don't know if I can be self-conscious. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can lose the self-conscious factor enough to LARP again. So it's entirely my problem, not the games. But we'll see how we go. I could well be enticed out with Passion Play.
Yeah, I think I've seen some good videos online of Passion Play in action, where people are playing at a convention center, and of course they're in a room and there's no windows. But the fact was their idea was that their characters were all at a casino on board a starship. So they didn't need windows, because you wouldn't want windows because they'll shatter and everything, and you'd be exposed to the elements. And that seemed to work. And also, compared to, say, I think as a Fading Suns, there's a lot more variety of how you can dress up. And so you can kind of, you can basically draw all the best parts of, like, classic fantasy LARP costumes.
Yeah.
And then you've got the best parts of, like, more futuristic outfits. So if you're kind of into, say, some of the clothing brands that I know of that, like, do kind of fusion cyberpunk kind of style clothing, you can grab those. And then anything in between or Victorian. And all of that is viable for a Fading Sun setting. And I think that'd be really cool. And I think the thing is then that I don't think there are any cliches for the Fading Sun setting. So not everyone's just turning up in their all vampires wearing frock coats and corsets and obviously looking like that, because that again to me represents the difference between how I envision how I see Vampire the Requiem compared to Vampire the Masquerade. It's like in Vampire the Requiem, if a player character goes, "Oh, I wear this," I was like, "You sure? You're gonna die." Yeah. So I think Passion Play would be really fun to do, and I think it would be fun to play if you've got your group of players. You could do a section where you all you kind of dress as close as in character as you can, or as new characters, and you just sat in your house. So you do it just as a live action segment of your normal game, and you're just kind of doing that bit where you're in some cabin on whatever ship, and you just get some food for the night, and you do it as a kind of like you're talking about and discussing things. And you could almost then do it as if you've got enough people that be interested in it, some other people that are into gaming but haven't been able to play in the main game, because obviously, you don't want 20 people playing, because that's ridiculous in your normal tabletop. But say you've got another 5 people, you could add them in, and then you could have a kind of an element of a murder mystery or kind of that type of game with that, and that's how I see you could run it as well. And add characters that so you've got other friends who are playing the NPCs, and then you've got your normal gaming group who are playing either their normal PCs, or they've decided to play an NPC because they don't feel they can portray their normal character, so they decided to roll to a different character. I think that'd be a fun way to do it.
Yeah, that'd be spectacular. That'd be awesome.
So, closing words, I guess. So obviously, there's Drive Thru RPG, latest edition, kind of meh. Again, Drive Thru RPG and eBay. That's my own opinion. I have looked at the book backwards and forwards. We've had Andrew Greenberg comment on Google Plus for us. So he is currently working on a mobile game version of Noble Armada. So that's cool. That's in the future, somewhere down the line. So you should
I'm looking forward to seeing that, Chris. So besides them putting out, sort of a very so-so edition, new edition of Fading Suns, do you have any idea if there was any plan for them to I don't know, add anything else to the background? Because one of my more recent acquisitions was, of course, the meta plot is a big factor in this game. I mean, the very title of the game, Fading Suns, is a meta plot, and I know, talking to Bill Bridges and Andrew Greenberg, I've read some interviews with them where they say, yes, there is definitely a reason why the stars are fading. Now there was a couple of setting books called War in the Heaven. And originally it was planned to be 3 books. I haven't spoken about them too much here because there's big spoiler plot stuff in there. So the first spoiler book was the first setting book, was War in the Heaven Lifeweb, which deals with the symbiotes, and the second one was War in the Heaven Hegemony, which deals with the Vow.
Yeah.
And the planned third one was going to be War in the Heaven, I think, Anunnaki, and it was going to deal with the progenitor race. It was going to deal with the jump gate builders, and of course, it never happened. For whatever reason, it never happened. I think holistic design had imploded by that point. So it'd be nice to see if they were ever planning on finishing the trilogy, putting out that book, and filling in some of the blanks. But then again, of course, if it's done by someone else, if it's kind of done by someone who wasn't Bill Bridges, then it might be a little bit, because
they have Bill Bridges and Andrew Greenberg have oversight, and Holistic Design still exists as a company, in some form, so they still have oversight on these books. So they get last say on it because it's their IP being developed by someone else. So it's much the same scenario between Onyx Path Publishing and CCP.
That's good.
So, obviously CCP doesn't have the time to keep developing more of the setting, so they may as well just churn it out to Onyx Path Publishing to manage that, because obviously that's Richard Thomas and the White Wolf writers. So it's just a way of managing it, and I think it's the same. It's basically the same scenario, but I'm just gonna. There's nothing more to say about Revised Edition.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough.
I'd buy something from FAST at the moment. It was a proper redo of the rules, and it's just like, because the other thing that I feel annoyed with it is they've done this player's guide and they're doing a GM's guide, I guess, eventually, and that seems to be delayed some more. I think it's meant for Gen Con or something, and the rules fixes that they've basically done in the Revised Edition, I don't think merits buying the whole book over again. It's one of those things. It's like, at least you can go out and go, oh, God Machine Chronicles rules changes, I really like them. Oh, look, I can get them for free.
Yeah, that was spectacular. I don't want to, once again, I don't want to spend the whole night singing Onyx Path's praises, but yeah, that's a good one. Very good company. More companies should do that.
Yeah, because when you've got a game that has so many books out that Fading Suns does, and there's a lot of good content, and all that needs to be done is either a few rules fixes, then fine, give it out for free. If you're doing a full overhaul to make the game more balanced and easy to play, faster, maybe takes in some more of the ideas and changes that, say, more contemporary roleplay games are using, and push it away from classic roleplay games, then a new edition. Yeah, maybe it's an edition that has more content in it from, the known worlds and includes more options. But they didn't do that. They just basically did a here's Revised Edition. It's basically second edition with some cut and paste and poor layout.
Shit, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've also got the IP to Blue Planet, which is another sci-fi game that I really like. So I know they've put out a player's guide and a GM's guide for that one. So I'm a little bit dubious now. I'm
looking at the Fading Suns player guide right now, and the text formatting and everything, and all the nice not scroll work, but the edges on the second edition book with all the cool Anunnaki technology. It's just. It's very, 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 very blah. Which is my, I'm honest. So that kind of wraps it up. So thank you, Peter, for your time and for your extensive knowledge, because obviously it's good to someone that loves the game as much as I do. I think there's really a need I would want to play it again and run it again at some point. I think it's one of those, I think the benefit of the sci-fi setting is, I think it's a sci-fi setting that you can get people that aren't necessarily into sci-fi. So, because of the kind of how it also ties into medieval type stuff and politics in that sense. I think it'd be cool to see at some point a hangout game run of this. That'd be kind of wicked to do.
Absolutely.
Easy to do. So all that needs to be said is we will include links to appropriate Drive-Thru RPG products in the post here that you'll see then somewhere on the post. We will also, if you have any comments or questions about this, tell us if we're wrong, tell us what we did right, tell us if you want to learn more, because I guess we could always do something more at some point. Then we can always be contacted at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. We, of course, are on Facebook, we're on Google+, so there'll be some talk there, I'm sure. We also have a Twitter, you can get in contact with us there. And we might.
What else? Did we have was there a competition currently running, or have we finished, or was that finished up now,
that's done, but we've got new competitions coming up, so keep an eye for more free products coming. And I will also find the link to the live journal thread, which has my actual play write-up for my Chronicle. So people can read it. Because that basically took players from Pandemonium to the planet of Ivor. Basically, it was the first third of my proposed entire Chronicle, if I had more time to run it. But yeah, I think that's about it then.
That's about it.
Excellent. So, ciao.
See you later.